I was given the enviable task of combining everything together and wrapping it up. So when we had the call with Paul, the rule was no jargon, a jargon-free discussion. So I'll try and do that, and I'll try and bring the various threads together with an expectation that we're going to be grilled at the end of it as well. So I've got that trepidation in mind. But one of the key questions that I think Jane threw out to us before, when we were discussing about this, was that she specifically asked to look ahead and tell us what's going to happen from a technology perspective 10 to 15 years ahead, and try and give us some examples that flesh that out. And you've heard some of the examples there, what we're doing with partners such as these in the airport space. And that's really what I'll touch on today. So this was the brief we were given. How do these trends enhance aviation efficiency? Just a point of clarification here that capacity and efficiency aren't the same thing. We often see a lack of capacity drives the need for efficiency, and vice versa, improvements in efficiency drive capacity, but they're not the same thing. And you'll see why as I walk this through, is when we talk about capacity and efficiency, smart services, monetarisation, etc., it's a multi-dimensional argument. It's not as simple as just that. So let's crack on with that. This is my get out of jail clause, that I can't be held accountable for anything that I say today because the future is, of course, unknown. But one of the things that we publish a fair bit of research online. This is one that has always stuck with me, that 20 years from now, the airport will be unrecognisable in terms of its services. We are starting to see rapid change in airports. 20 years ago, I think airports and aviation led the world, that there hasn't been the same investment in IT within an airport infrastructure for some time, but now you're starting to see it ramp up again. But the thing that we observe with all of our customers is that no single model fits all. Every airport is different. There's a saying in the industry, if you know one airport, you know one airport. So putting this in context, airports are complex ecosystems. There's a lot going on inside an airport. The three major stakeholders that we deal with in an airport, the airlines, the ground handler and the airport authority, that's what it's like. It's silos. So we talk about data and we talk about services, but the reality is that these three groups don't collaborate, and they're driven by different metrics, they're driven by different forces, and often they don't want to collaborate. So how do we optimise airport services in that? What we find often is that there's a very narrow view around optimisation. It's an airport-centric, it's in-terminal, it's car park to curb, car park to airside, and so forth. What we're seeing as a trend is the extension of airport services. And this is what I mean about tackling capacity, is that airports are starting to wake up to the fact that they're part of an extended travel ecosystem. So you'll start to see airports extending their value proposition outside of the airport and starting to collaborate with other service providers. And that's where our company, Amadeus, comes in. We've got a concept of the whole ecosystem of travel, and that's what you'll see. You'll start to see the airport starting to think more about taking its services outside it, and I'll show you how we can enable that. The next one, so in order to enable that value chain, obviously you're going to see integration of services across that value chain. And that's what we see a lot of the industry focusing on. Suffice to say that airports, not all of them are run as a commercial business. Some of them are run as a government entity. A lot of them don't have skills and expertise, and a lot of them will actually struggle to do that. So we see this a lot. Not so much in the UK, where your airports are well resourced, but elsewhere around the world, airports struggle to do that level of integration. They end up becoming very small silos. Help is on the way though. There was a fascinating book written a few years ago by Nicholas Carr called The Big Switch. In that book he puts forward a key theory or a key observation that I think is relevant to airports of today. Electricity and computing share a special trait. They both can be delivered efficiently from a great distance over a network. Because they don't have to be produced locally, they can achieve the scale and economies of central supply. And once it becomes possible to provide technology centrally, large-scale utility suppliers arise and displace the private local providers. And Nicholas Carr in his book, he uses the example of local energy suppliers back 100 years ago and how that was displaced by the electricity grid. And his key argument, the grid wins. He talks about cloud computing in that context, and his mindset is the grid wins. And that's what we firmly believe in Amadeus. We're a cloud-based service provider, so of course we're going to say that. But that's what we see. We see the ubiquitous and the utility of cloud-based computing really starting to come into the airport infrastructure, because airports, as I said before, they often struggle with that complexity. They struggle from a monetary perspective and so forth. And often the environment, it's highly complex and it's driven by different stakeholders. So what you'll start to see is this sort of model here, that extended value chain that I said before. You'll still see the integration of services locally, but you'll start to see cloud-based providers come in, both as we talked about with HP and Siemens, big data services, absolutely. Amadeus is a big data service company as well, and we provide other services in that space. We're a particular travel industry company for that. The other thing that you'll start to see on this concept of utility, you'll start to see what we call community-based platforms, a la an industry platform that serves multi-airports. So at the moment, we've got these silos. Every airport's got its own legacy thing. You're starting to see it move to a community-based platform, starting to see multi-airport solutions. What you're also starting to see is collaboration between the airlines and the ground handlers. There's not a lot of collaboration there now. In the UK, at some airports, it might be different. BA at Heathrow, as an example, it's hub airport. But not every airline shares it started with an airport. And that's where an information broker, so to speak, like Amadeus comes into the picture, where they're all customers of ours. We try and broker that relationship so that you can leverage the big data assets. Where's the proof that this is happening? This is a chart right now to show you how we support some 1,100 airports globally from a data centre in Germany. So it's already happening. The airlines are already doing it. This is what we call our TIA, our departure control system. We service all those airports, including Sydney, including New Zealand, centrally from our data centre in Germany. It can happen, it does happen, it's been happening for years. The next step is to take it into other services in the cloud, and again, that's our focus. You can see the sort of statistics there. More importantly, we just don't do this for airlines, we do this across the travel industry. So this is what's coming into the airport industry. So we're focused on airports, but these figures up here might surprise you at the numbers that are involved from a global operation like Amadeus. And again, we're only focused on airlines and airports at this stage and ground handlers. But you can see what that gives us. The reason why we flagged that, and again, the gentleman before us talked about data and data sources. That's what we've got to tap into, and that's what we're starting to work on now as to how do we leverage that for an airport. Now, obviously, data sensitivity, we talked about data protection before, what that means. We just don't give data away to the airport. We can't. It's commercially sensitive data. Who owns the data? Ultimately, it's the passenger owns the data. The customer owns the data. So we work with the airports and the airlines and the ground handlers to actually start to share that data. Because what you might be surprised to know is that the average airport knows absolutely nothing about its customers because it's got no touch points. All the touch points are either an airline or a ground handler. From my perspective, where I come from in Brisbane, Australia, where we got the most valuable data from, our online booking system for the car park. That's the only touch point that the airport owned where we could see the customer data. So this will start to change as we play in this industry and so forth. So we will start to leverage those things as we saw the value proposition before around data. And the thing that we'll bring to the table on our side of it, because we're in that travel ecosystem, predictive analytics. The average airport doesn't have access to forecasting data. What do they forecast on? Historical data. And holidays change, seasons change, bird flu happens, Ebola happens, so things happen. So tapping into an industry player such as Amadeus, we're not the only one, but tapping into that will start to give you predictive analytics and start to give airports the ability to see into the future. And that's really important for scheduling, disruption management, resourcing and so forth. And that's where resource optimisation comes in. And you'll see a lot of that around not just air traffic control, but schedule recovery, disruption recovery on the day of operations. So it's an emerging ecosystem, and these are the key focus points. And you've heard the gentleman talk about before how we're going to leverage that data. These are the trends that are coming into the airport that you'll see in future. The Internet of Things, what does that mean? what means everything's connected to everything else, and we start to get much more visibility of what's happening. So what does that mean? To me, it means disruptive innovation. That's what we're going to see in the airport space. So it's not just going to be players like what we've seen up here on stage today. It's going to be other ones. There was a book written, Clayton Christensen wrote this about 10, 12 years ago. And in it, he uses the example of Kodak as an example, just to put it in mindset. Kodak actually came up with the concept of the digital camera. But where's Kodak today? For airports, where's Uber? What's happening with Uber? So airports make a substantial amount of revenue from their parking systems. At Brisbane Airport, we made a lot of money from our charging of transport and limousine companies. What does Uber do to that model? It changes the model. Airports in the US are starting to embrace that, and they're starting to deal with the Uber taxi fleet, so to speak, and they're starting to embrace that. So it's going to be highly disruptive in the airport. And what that means, so the Internet of Things, and what it means is that you're going to start to see highly personalised service that we talked about before. Other service providers are going to be providing services to passengers inside the airport. So it's a big challenge for the airport what they do with it. But also, with challenge goes opportunity, obviously, to engage with the customer, develop and deliver personalised services to that. So I didn't touch on it today, but there's a big thrust in the industry to go self-service. Self-service, self-service, self-service. That's just one mode. The other stream is premium service. That's where airports make their money, or can make their money. So for example, if you get to an airport and you've got the opportunity to pay for a premium service and get through security, who would pay for it? I'd pay for it every time. And the last one, just to touch on briefly, is shared situational awareness. That's what the Internet of Things will bring largely to it, is that once you get visibility of all that, you can then start to see what's going on inside your airport and recover from disruptive operations. What's that relying on though? We talked about at the start, the network. So from my perspective, the most critical infrastructure at the airport in the future is not the servers or the server room, it's going to be the network. It's going to be how it connects through to other things. And that's going to be crucial. The airport is a connected place. It's going to be crucial to how the airport functions, performs, and resilience, because increasingly its services that it delivers to its customers are not going to come from on-site, they're going to come from off-site on community-based platforms.